Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we have finished gluing up our end panels, and it is now time for us to go ahead and create our long rails. Now the long rails are going to run in between the two end assemblies. So they're going to be made in much the same way that the short rails were made. So I want to just talk briefly about how we're going to do that, and then get to work cutting these out. So to do this, I have found a piece of wood that I'm going to use for my long rails. I've consulted the plans here, and I'm making an end table, and it says that the numbers for my long rails for the end table are 20 inches. So I've got plenty of material here. I'm going to go ahead and measure and mark out a little over 20 inches, so maybe 20 and a half, and 20 and a half again. Now that I'm going to have two pieces here, 1, 2, and that is going to give me all 4 of my long rails. 2 upper long rails and 2 lower long rails. The width of the upper long rails is 3.5 inches, and the width of the lower long rails is 2.5 inches. So if I look at the width of this board here, I've got 7.5 inches, so I'm going to be able to get 1 upper short rail and 1 lower short rail out of each one of these boards for a total of 4 long rails. Sorry. So I'm going to take these over to the chop saw. I'm going to break them down into pieces and then walk through the whole process of squaring up a board. And then we will reconvene and meet at the far table saw to talk about cutting the tenons on these. To the appropriate size. I've got 2 lower long rails and 2 upper long rails. Okay, they're obviously different widths, but that is by design. We're going to go ahead and cut the tenons on these. It's going to be much the same way we did the tenons for the short rails, with a little bit of a difference. The tenons on the long rails are not centered on the board. They're offset to one face. Okay, this means a couple things for us. Okay, one, we need to make sure we look at our material and determine, which side we want to see versus which side we don't. Okay, the side that is flush with the tenon is the outside of the rail, so we want it to be the nicest looking side for us. Now, the other nice thing about this setup is the face cut or the cheek cut and both of these shoulder cuts are exactly the same according to the plan. So once we have it set up, we can cut all the tenons at one time with one setup. We don't have to worry about making a face cut and then changing the setup to do the shoulder cuts. So I've consulted the plans. We've got a 1/2 inch tenon, so I've got a 1/2 inch worth of saw blade. Okay, I'm going to set this a 1/2 inch, just like before, from the fence. Okay, and I've got the blade 3/8 of an inch high because according to the tenons, or excuse me, according to the plans, that is what I need. I've got my end assembly over here so I can check my tenon fit as I work on my setup here, and once I have it, we'll run all of them. So I'm going to take a quick second to look at these and determine which surface I like, okay, and which surface I want to hide. And I'm going to put an X on the surface that I want to hide. Okay, these will be the inside faces, so I will not be able to see them in my finished table. Right? Now that means these X's now are going to be the inside faces of my rails, so they're going to go down on my table, or on the table saw table while I'm cutting my tenon. So I'm going to cut one test piece, and we will check our fit and see if we need to make any adjustments with the blade, and once I'm happy with the fit, we will cut all the rest of these. So let me get everything going here and get the vacuum on, and we will come back and get these test fit into our mortises. Got all of our tenons cut. I'm going to go ahead and take a few minutes now and clean them up and get them to fit with the mortises, just like we did with the tenons on the short rails. I'll get each one to fit. I will label it and make sure that they all fit in a specific location. So we'll see you in a minute. Table, almost. You can see we cleaned up all the tenons and fit them to mortises. Each one of these rails and tenons has been labeled, with a corresponding number. That, for example, this is number 4, and that's number 4 mortise. So I know they go together. Okay, and we've got 8 and 8 over here. So we know that this rail has to go in this location. Okay, everything fits nice and tight. It's all been labeled, so the last thing we need to do for our long rails is cut an arc to mimic the arc in the short rail that we cut earlier. So we're going to cut an arc similar to this one on both lower long rails. So I will lay these out, and we'll head to the bandsaw, cut them out, and then head to the spindle sander and sand them down to a finished shape. So we're going to talk quickly about where this arc goes. It only goes on the lower long rails, and we want to make sure that we lay it out so that it's on the bottom edge of the rail as it's assembled. So I've marked my piece, okay, so that the arc is going to come out of the bottom. I've marked a center point, and I've marked the point 1 inch up, which is according to the plans. And what I'm going to use is a flexible ruler here and bend that ruler so it goes from corner to center point to corner, and then we'll trace that arc and cut it out on the bandsaw. Alright, so now we've got an arc. We're going to be able to head to the bandsaw now, rough that out, and then head over to the spindle sander to get it down to its finished size. Over at the bandsaw, step number 1, remember, is to lower your guard so that we're just above the workpiece. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, we want it as low as we can go and still being able to maneuver the workpiece around underneath and tighten that up. Now this is a really long, gentle curve, so I don't think I need any relief cuts. I'm going to attempt to make this in one long pass. Remember, we want to keep our pencil mark on the side of, or on our workpiece. We want to make sure that we have a mark to go ahead and sand to later. If we cut this off of our workpiece, we're going to be in trouble. Okay, so again, we've put a lot of work into this workpiece already, so let's take our time and make sure we leave our line, okay, and end up with a nice curve here. So I was able to get that cut out in one foul swoop. And again, I've left my pencil mark, and now what I can do is head over to that spindle sander and sand that down right to my line. Alright, over at the spindle sander, we're going to go ahead and sand this down to the line. Remember, this rotates clockwise, so we want to feed into the direction of the rotation, otherwise it's going to want to scoot it out. Okay, remember, fluid passes, we don't want to stay in one place for too long. That looks good. Okay, again, I still have my line there. I didn't feel like I needed to go any further. I got a nice arc, and I'm pleased with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go transfer this onto my other piece, or my other long rail, and I'm going to repeat the same process, and that will finish up our long rails. There you have it. Okay, all of our long rails are done. Okay, we cut the tenons, we've cut the arcs in the bottoms, we've dry fit everything to kind of get an idea that it all fits. Okay, you can see everything is starting to look nice and tight, and we're starting to actually look at a table here. So our next step is to go ahead and create the bottom shelf, and it's going to be a couple of step process because we're going to have to go about gluing a panel together. So that is what we're going to do next. So we'll see you in the next video making the bottom.